Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Conversations program. My name is Colleen Milliard. If you've just arrived, I'm the executive editor here at Art Basel, and I'm delighted to introduce this panel entitled Collecting for a Purpose, Corporations and Cultural Institutions, that has been put together in collaboration with our partner at UBS. On stage today, we have Cathérine Hug, who is the curator at the Kunsthaus in Zurich, Marie Rozell, the global head of UBS Art Collection, Dr. Anne Vieth, who is the head of the Mercedes-Benz Art Collection in Stuttgart, and last but certainly not least, Matthew Newton, who is the executive director and art advisory specialist for Family Office Solution of UBS in New York. Please join me in welcoming them all to the conversation stage. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Look at all these people that came to hear you guys speak. This is very exciting. Well, terrific. Well, as you just said, my name is Matthew Newton, Executive Director and Art Advisory Specialist for UBS in the United States. Here visiting from New York. Love being here for Basel, of course. And welcome to Collecting for a Purpose, Corporations and Cultural Institutions. I think it's going to be a very fascinating conversation. We're all very fortunate today to hear from experts and leaders from 3 extraordinary collections and to learn about how they do their jobs building these collections and while navigating the many overlapping interests and concerns that come about naturally from these sprawling organizations. That's not an easy task for anyone, so I think we all feel very lucky to get to hear from you today, so thank you very much for being here. I'll quickly share a brief bio on each of the speakers and then we'll dive right into the conversation. So first here in the middle, Cathérine Hug holds an MA in art history and has been a curator at Kunsthaus Zürich since 2013, where she has been responsible for retrospectives devoted to Francis Picabia, Oskar Kokoschka, Suzanne Duchamp, and Lygia Clark. Among Hug's many thematic shows are Fly Me to the Moon from 2019, Take Care, Art and Medicine from 2022, and Time, from Durer to Bonvenici from 2023. Thank you very much for being here, Cathérine. And here to my left is Dr. Anne Vieth, who has been the head of the Mercedes-Benz Art Collection since July 2023. With her team, she has realized exhibition projects at the Studio Odeonsplatz in Munich, the Mercedes-Benz Museum, and Espacio CDMX in Mexico City. From 2017 to 2023, she was curator at the Kunstmuseum Stuttgart. There, in addition to post-1945 art, she was in charge of the Otto Dix and Fritz Winter collections and curated the special exhibitions Patrick Angus Private Show, Ecstasy, Van die Walls, From 1914 Till Ukraine, and Wolfgang Leib, The Beginning of Something Else. And look at the people. Vieth studied art history, German language and literature, and Spanish literature in Hamburg, where she completed her doctorate in art history. Thank you very much for being here. And my colleague, Marie Rozell, on the end here, is the global head of the UBS Art Collection. She is responsible for the strategic direction and management of UBS's art collection of over 40,000 works of art, considered to be one of the most important collections of its kind. An art lawyer and art historian, Mary is the author of the Art Collector's Handbook, the definitive guide to acquiring and owning art. She has acted as an advisor to collectors, artists, and estates on all issues relating to the acquisition, management, and deaccessioning of private art collections, and is a recognized leader in the field. So please join me in welcoming our 3 wonderful panels today. Thank you very much. Okay, great. So here we go. So I'd like to talk first about thinking that we probably have an audience here that includes a substantial portion of people who they themselves are collectors who have come to Basel thinking about making acquisitions, and perhaps a few curators in the room, fellow curators. I thought it would be interesting to hear from each of you about the origins of the collections that you work for, and whether it's came from private individuals or from more institutional perspective. And Cathérine, I'd love to start with you here, since you're our local Swiss representative. You work as a curator of the Kunsthaus Zürich, one of the most important public institutions in Switzerland. But I'm curious to hear, even though it's a public institution today, like some of the origins of where it may have started with private individuals in the beginning.
So thank you for this interesting question, and thank you for being here, for having me here. I need to make a slight correction. Kunsthaus is actually a private public institution. Mm-hmm. It's not a fully public institution. We are actually our foundation is an association. It's the Zürcher Kunstgesellschaft. We have over 22,000 members. They pay, this income is a substantial part of our subsidies. So it's 50-50, or let's say 49-51. And so this has the advantage of keeping us independent in different directions. So this is to say we are public-private cooperation. And it goes back to the 18th century, where it was actually an artist association. And so with part of our collection go back to that time where we had pretty humble contributions of artists in painting books that size, and that was in the 18th century, and actually the actual museum was founded in 1910, and the collection, you could say, with the large paintings by Ferdinand Hodler and so on, goes back to this. Oskar Kokoschka had one of his first survey exhibitions there, or Edward Munch. So that's why we have these holdings, because the directors at that time worked in their lifetime with these artists. And one of what we are most well known are the Giacometti holdings, Alberto Giacometti. And this actually was a donation from an association that is, so it goes back to the 60s, and but there are many other stories like that. But to come back to a very important organization that supports us since the beginning in our collection holdings, beyond the own budget we have, which is comfortable but not enormous, is the Friends of the Kunsthaus, the Friends Association that has been, or Kunstfreunde Zürich, who has been founded in 1917, and to acquire Ferdinand Hodler work. And there is an interesting anecdote about that, because the actual curator at that time found this a little bit elitarian, that it needs an association to subsidize art. So it was a complicated beginning with, because of Rigini, the artist curator at that time. But then at one point it was fully clear that this collection now, on the highlights of our displayed collection, 30% of the works come from these art friends holdings. Yeah.
Interesting. So it really truly is sort of a collection made up of many individuals contributing to it in a way, which is very fascinating. Anna, I'd love to hear from you about this with the Mercedes-Benz collection, which is fascinating, and we will hear from Mary as well about the corporate collection from UBS as well. But for Mercedes-Benz, when did it begin? Was there a few individuals in the company that spearheaded the collection, or was it always sort of a corporate effort?
The Mercedes-Benz art collection, the former Daimler-Benz collection, was founded in 1977. And it was, indeed, there were two persons who were really engaged into the arts. It was the former CEO, Edzard Reuter. He died last year. And maybe some of you have heard it in the press that some weeks ago his private collection was auctioned. So he was very much into art, and he decided that for Mercedes-Benz, the company, he wanted to build up a collection of art that enables the employees of Mercedes-Benz to get in touch with the arts during their daily working routine. Something which I found super nice until today. And these two men, the other person was Hans Baumgart. He was the person responsible for the art collection for the first 15 years. And together, these two persons developed the art collection. And they're very keen on separating the private collection and the interests and the profile of this private Edzard Reuter collection from the Mercedes-Benz art collection. And that's also how our profiles developed. So Yes, there was the ambition of 2 individuals, but it was always a corporate collection dealing with the employees and the public audience. And today we say it was corporate citizenship, so we are really incorporating the social engagement of Mercedes-Benz as a global company.
I'm very excited to hear more about that. That's a fascinating transition. It's kind of drawing that line between what a person wants to do versus what that same person as the leader of an organization wants to do. So we'll talk more about that. Yeah. First, Mary, would love to hear from you. You know, UBS's collection now, we often say it's over 40,000 pieces, one of the most important of its kind, but maybe that wasn't always the case.
Right.
So we'd love to hear a little bit about the origins of the collection.
Yeah. The roots of the UBS art collection, like I think the Mercedes-Benz collection, started around the 60s and 70s, but this collection is made up of a number of different collections and is the result of essentially mergers and acquisitions of different banks. So there were 2 parallel stories going on. One was in Switzerland, where you had the Union Bank of Switzerland, the Swiss Bank Corps, Credit Suisse. They all ultimately merged into what is now UBS. But then at the same time, you had an American collection, which was the Payne Weber collection. And that was a different model. That was very much driven by an individual collector, connoisseur, Don Marin. And so the collections were quite different. The European collections were mostly European artists, some American, and the American collection was mostly US artists when it started. But that's also because the art market was very different then. And it was only in the 1990s where you had globalization, where you started to see overlap in these collections. But now we've taken it in a very different direction, but it's interesting because each collection brought a different history, a different focus, and then we tried to make a cohesive whole out of it.
I'm very excited to hear about the new direction that you've been taking it over the last several years, and we'll certainly cover that topic. First, I'd like to start with a very simple question that I think probably comes with a lot of complexities, and that is, how exactly do you buy a work of art as a cultural institution or a corporation? You know, I assume, I could be wrong, but I assume you don't sort of show up to Basel and say, I'll take this, I'll take this, I'll take this. You know, I imagine there's a few more steps that go into it. So I'd love to hear a little bit, maybe Mary, we'll start again with you, of what's a little bit of the process, like how does a corporation buy an artwork?
Well, when I started 10 years ago, Matthew, that was also a question for me. How do we do this? And is there a system? How does it work? And we even tried to set up a little bit of a system, but it quickly dissolved, I would say. It's quite simple, actually, in that we are really collecting for office needs. Our artworks are in over 700 offices around the world, and so we're always thinking of the next project. And we're thinking of specific spaces, and those specific spaces are usually meeting rooms or reception areas. The collection is for our employees, but also for our clients. That's where the focus is. So we do have spaces in mind. Concurrently, we have artists that we're following. And so the missing piece is you don't know when certain works are going to come onto the market. So what we've learned also is that you have to remain very nimble and be able to react quickly. And we have a global team. There are 13 of us in 6 different countries, different time zones. And every day is sharing of information. I saw this. Oh, you know, our London person will say, you guys are in Basel, go check out this piece. And it's a constant ongoing conversation, and then something just hits and we make the decision. But it's always connected to what we're doing. My first question to the team will be, where's this going to go? And they will, or they will say to me, you know, we have this new project in Kowloon. I need 2 pieces for the meeting rooms. This is the right size. This is the right artist. And that's kind of how it's very organic. And sometimes it happens in spurts, not always at a fair or in a buying situation, but it is about the market movement itself.
And
then, how much money we have left is a factor too.
Well, that's true. The money part always
It's
counts.
not infinite.
Yeah.
Right.
It's nice to hear that a corporation that size can still be organic in its approach to collecting as well, which is almost surprising. Catherine, I'd love to hear from you about the same conversation from the museum's perspective. I'm curious also, like, your own personal influence in that process as well.
Ooh, it's huge. No, the dialogue aspect is essential, and each curators, some are less known, some are very well known. Harald Seemann, Wietse Kuriger, Tobias Betzola. I mean, each of these singular individual contributed to the collection holdings. And now we are a small, I mean, the amount of curators is approximately remains the same. It's Sandra Gianfreda, Philipp Büttner, the head of collection, and Jonas Bayer, the director, Ande Meester, and me. This is basically, we meet regularly and exchange about what we see. All of us have a little bit own expertise. So I'm very much into painting, Dada, first part of the 20th century. Obviously, this is not the price class where we would be able to buy so much ourselves, but I can give recommendations to the association I mentioned before, Zürcher Kunstfreunde. And the other thing you mentioned are the thematic shows. So there I'm keen to bring together also contemporary artists, but obviously our exchange, as colleagues did before, is very much also about current production, what's going on there, how they stand in the formally and in the content, in art history, and we screen our current holdings, but happened before, in which media do the artists work, topics, things like that. So, but this remains a constant that we try to be the first and also maybe not do exactly the same collection as colleagues in Basel or Bern would do, right? So these are museums with own collections, but it happens that we have same interests, so we try also to exchange with colleagues, what are you working on, which show, and so. This is a little bit the dynamic, very much about keeping it transparent in the team and an information flow.
Yeah, great. And Anna, for you, you're thinking about the Mercedes-Benz collection, and you mentioned this idea of the sort of the evolution a little bit. So I'm curious, in your acquisition process, how does it look different today than it did maybe kind of the early days in the collection, and how does your sort of fingerprints go into it today?
I think it didn't change that much because it's still the same process that we decide, or we have ideas, then we discuss it with the different hierarchies. But this is the good thing, that content-wise it's really up to us, because everyone knows in the company that we are the art department. That means we know what are the profile of our collection, and for me the most important thing is, if I do an acquisition, that there's a link to the collection, that we can build bridges to the artworks we already have and to the new ones. So this is really extremely important, and I think I found this very funny idea, because I think this is also a difference between being a curator in a profession or being a private person or a private collector. Because as a private person, you go and you see something and then you say, I need this and I buy it now. This is something normally you can't do if you're there in a function, because you have certain things to discuss and to clarify before you buy. And also, at least for me, it's also important to think about it, to do research on the artist, to also observe him or her for a certain time to see whether development is how I thought that it would be. So it's also a quality aspect. And Mary, you said you are thinking in terms of spaces or sites. This is a bit different in the Mercedes-Benz art collection, because when I buy something or we buy something, I always try to think about showing it in a white cube situation or more in a museum or a gallery, but at the same time in the offices. So our works should be able to do both. So for example, I'm just in the acquiring process of a video work, and that was that I asked the gallerist and the artist whether for her it would be fine to have the possibility to show the video in a big screen when I go in a more museum situation, but whether it would be also fine to show it on a small screen when we show it in the offices, because I can't show it on a screen, you know, like that wouldn't work. So this is a kind of discussion you normally have with the artists.
I'm so glad you brought up this idea, because I wanted to get into this next, which is a very practical question that each of you face, is where does the art live in the buildings that you are, that the collections exist within? And I think that it's especially, we'll start again here with you, Anna, with the Mercedes-Benz has this very distinctive building that houses the collection, famous building. You all have multiple buildings that you're thinking about. And so I'd love to hear, how does that really affect your decision process? You highlighted a little bit like this example, but is that always part of it, or are you able to sort of leave that thought behind a little bit?
You're referring to the Mercedes-Benz Museum in Stuttgart, where we show a little selection of it's like a permanent collection, if you want so, from the art collection. And to be honest, I don't buy thinking about this special museum. But I know that if I select a presentation, we need bigger formats, because these are huge walls, so. And of course, there is this very special moment of curating into an art show, a show with cars. And this can be quite tricky, to be honest, but it's also very challenging. And for example, we have perfect fits. At the moment, we are showing two works by Andy Warhol from our car series in the first room where the Mercedes-Benz with the first cars is shown. So there's a real match, because we have two works by Andy Warhol which show the cars which are displayed. So this is a perfect match. Others are a bit more, I would say, subtle. For example, we have a work by Sung Tue. She's a young artist, and she's going to be represent Germany in the next Venice Biennale. So we always try to, and this is the big chance of this museum, that there are so many people from all around the world. And some of them know that there's art in the museum, but the majority come to see the cars. And then it's so good to see that how the people react. Seeing an artwork, they are like, oh, what's that? And these are the 2 seconds we have to take as a chance and to really bring the artwork to the people. And this is the curatorial challenge, but also the huge opportunity of this museum. And honestly, I love to be in the museum, because I see especially young people, they stay there, they read the text, and they understand where they can find the artworks through the whole building. So I really like a lot to curate for this.
That's terrific.
Special museum.
That must be fun to sort of drift around and get to watch sort of the reactions to your work as a curator throughout. Mary, you touched on this when you were speaking before about the idea that most of your acquisitions start with a building project. But I'm curious, are there moments when you're ever able to say, okay, this work is great, we're going to acquire it, and we'll figure out where to put it?
Oh, definitely. We do have those moments where we might not have the exact spot for it, but we know that it fits the collection, and we just need to get that work. We also do have a public space. I was just thinking, we don't have a museum, but we do have a public gallery in New York, and that is a different kind of space for us. I was just thinking of this, Anne, because for me, it's like I go into that office every day, and it's such a delight for me to see who's there, who's come in off the street, who's enjoying this art. It may be a father and a daughter, it may be a school group, curators come in, and a lot of people that don't know anything about art. So that's kind of a special joy, and that feeds into the equation too. Now that we have this public space, it's kind of a little bit of a curatorial playground for us. It's nothing very formal, but that's always in mind. And another thing that Anne said that was making me think, of our acquisitions. Of course, they always have to collect to the greater whole. We don't, it's about building a certain cohesion, knowing that you have this material to create different stories out of, right? Different exhibitions, whether that story is in a building in Frankfurt or in the public gallery or in our lounge upstairs. We want there to be a connection. You want there to be meaning in terms of what you're collecting.
Well, that reminds me, maybe you'd be willing to share the story, of a work that was created for a building in one country and is now installed and sort of repurposed where it is today.
Yeah.
That's, I think, which is really fascinating.
Yeah, that's, sometimes you have to be creative. And one of the things that UBS has a fantastic history of artist collaborations and commissions going back to the 1960s. So those are some of our most amazing artworks, and they can be large scale. But what a lot of people didn't think about is, what's going to happen if we don't have this building anymore? And we have this giant artwork, or Pipilotti wrist hanging furniture and TVs off the ceiling in a lobby in one Swiss branch. And how do we take care of this stuff long term is another whole other topic. But we did the very first commission of the American artist Sarah Morris was done in 2001, so 24 years ago, for an office in Zurich. And my first week on the job in Zurich, 10 years ago, I saw this work and I was blown away by it, but then I learned we were going to lose that building. But what we were able to do was have the artist come in and reimagine that same work for a new space in the lobby at our headquarters in the Americas. But since that time we were talking, when we do something like that now, we make sure that the panel, say that something's being painted on, can be removed just in case 20 years down the road, real estate plans change.
Yeah, great. And Cathérine, I'd love to sort of get into this topic with you and really thinking about space in terms of storage and exhibition, which is a constant conversation, I think, for institutions. And really this applies to anyone who is collecting art, even myself in my small New York apartment. I've run out of walls already, so it's like, what do you do? And I'm curious how you sort of balance the concerns from an acquisition standpoint when you're thinking about building the collection with what's getting shown, how much opportunity you have to show those things versus things going to storage and those kinds of topics.
I mean, Kunsthaus is step by step got bigger and bigger. I mentioned the model house, so to say, in 1910, Karl Moser, and then in the 58 came fully exhibition space. It's no collection at this place. That's the place where I would make and create shows in so a modernist building from the 50s. And in 76 was again an extension, and in 21 was the Chipperfield extension. And this last extension doubled the size of the museum. It was from 5,000 square meters exhibition space and collection display space to 10,000. And this was, and I was and still am in the curatorial team where we are have the chance to think about this, and but have need to. I mean, this is an ongoing process. Obviously, we thought about that before. What will go into this new building? Otherwise, it would not have been built. I mean, it was also again half state subsidized and privately subsidized, this new building, but so this is a major new aspect. We have 3 private collections there, permanent loans, where there are discussions about if they will get into a donation, and there are a substantial part is also collection holdings. And for example, for my part, I was thinking, and also with Miriam Baradinis, to install a place for digital art, and also for Dada, and one further for video to show that permanently, which we didn't have before. So, and the storage and all the other facilities are 30,000 more square meters of offices, storage. So we have, that's also new, that was a big shift. We have no external storage, basically no more of that. And it's much closer, it's very convenient also because we have a full restoration department, restoration on paper, sculpture, oil canvas. So this is can be now much more and better be managed. So did I answer your question, or is it too
No, I think that's good.
meanderic? I mean, I didn't mention any specific artist, but this is to keep in general terms. We could make with this extension double of the place that before 2021. Honestly, it was also pretty challenging during COVID to think about, because will people come back to museums? What happens is all now in the virtual world. I mean, this was pretty bound to anxieties too. Right. And very obviously people, and that's the purpose of museums, is to make the art be a physical experience and a social experience. And the most important shift in terms of the kind of work we collect is installations. We didn't speak yet about installative work that are huge with thousands of pots, and so what we see on Art Unlimited. By the way, I worked for Unlimited for a while. That was a long time ago. I worked for this kind of installation displays. And the other is from a national museum to global approach, what you mentioned before. It's absolutely not adequate anymore to collect only Swiss artists or European artists. This is not our world anymore today, right? So.
Well, I'm also really glad to hear that it's all in the rearview mirror for us, that the museums are growing in the space, and there's obviously no question that people want to visit museums today, which is great. And I'd like to shift gears to think about the one thing that really distinguishes what each of you do with your collections from what a strictly private collection is. And your collections are really meant for, in some cases, for education and for outreach, and from a corporate side that even bleeds into the idea of branding in a sense. And so Anna, maybe we could start. I'd love to hear sort of what kind of efforts and activations are you participating in to help the public know about the collection and to sort of bring awareness to the works that are in the collection.
So we do exhibitions. Like 3 weeks ago, I opened an exhibition in Mexico City with the title Belonging, and it deals about the topic of identity. And what we do with our exhibitions is to look for issues or socially relevant topics that can be combined with company issues, but also with socially relevant issues. And I mean, identity is something that is highly discussed not only in the artistic world, in society in general. And so what we did is bring 20 works from the exhibition and put it into dialogue with 12 artists, contemporary young artists from Mexico City, which I found very interesting because it also enables us to build these bridges without buying works, but in this exhibition setting, we really can have loans from different collectors or private persons and include this into our exhibition projects. Then we have the Mercedes-Benz Museum, and then also with registration, you can also come into the headquarters. But the presentations, the internal ones, they are mainly for our colleagues, and there we have regular guided tours, and this is also always very moving because the people are super proud after the tours because they realize. I always tell them, there are not so many people which can day by day sit in front of a Schlemmer, and then they say, "Oh, okay, that's interesting," but then they really feel what the idea of the collection was in the beginning, that you can have this short break during working hours to change perspective, to discuss something. So we have like short lunch lectures, lunch breaks. We have evening guided tours with families. So it's this, I would say, multi-layered program of internal, external.
Mm-hmm. And Catherine, how about for you at the museum, from the education component? I mean, what sort of efforts does the museum take to bring in people? I'm sure people want to visit the museum constantly, but to sort of expand the outreach to share the collection.
this is never a complete, cannot have a goal that you reach. It's a constant way of discovering who your audience is. The community outreach gets more and more important because there was a point where there was no education department at all, back in a few decades ago. Mm-hmm. So I have to mention some colleagues that are still at Kunsthaus now, such as Sibyl Kraft. She built up this educational department. Now we have new goals. This educational department exists, new goals. We want, for example, to exchange much more with curators and Pia Ledrach. She is now newly appointed to make events, to reach live, like what we do here, conferences, and reach, again, other audiences. We are in a fragmented society, and some of the people have still, much more than we think, have still this... It's too complicated to... how do you say this? Schwellenangst. How do you say this?
Like barriers.
Yes. Of course, you need to start at schools and even earlier, but then you need to continue. So I love that part. I can contribute to this approach with maybe I try to have exhibition proposals as various as possible. At the same time, I'm now getting specialized in a few things, so I need to keep this expertise. So it's a constant balance, but the best is to also connect with each department. That happened not enough, and is now in educational and visibility terms a new thing. The third thing I'm very close to is the visibility of the history of the institution, the memory of the institution, the archives. Not only the past 2 years, but we have an archive that goes back to, as I said, the 18th century. And for this, we have the fantastic digital time where we can put a lot of things that are copyright-free now online, and that people see it's also fantastic to dive into history. By the way, artists are interested in that as well, and to make this accessible. So this is a trend which is much older now. It's around 15 years. And we share also really experience with colleagues about that. Other museums, other collections. It's an ongoing process. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, great.
Yeah.
And Mary, I know you mentioned the gallery at our headquarters in New York, which I understand you spearheaded. I'm curious to hear about that effort in terms of bringing recognition to the collection among the public, and what other sort of activities you participated in for that.
I think, after 60 years, art has really become part of the UBS brand, right? And part of that has to do with our sponsorship of Art Basel, which in itself has lasted over 30 years. Mm-hmm. So, we're kind of automatically part of that brand. And we also the bank is the largest wealth manager in the world. A lot of our clients are collectors. Matthew and I both, you primarily now, but spend a lot of time with our clients just talking about art, building those connections. But a collection like ours, we've always been buying on the primary market shortly after the works have been created at fairly low values. But over time, a number of those artworks have become not only valuable in terms of money, but culturally valuable. And so we also feel like it's wonderful that our clients get access to this art. It's wonderful that our employees get access to the art, but maybe we also have a responsibility to share it to a broader public. So the gallery was one example, which we opened in 2019. We also got very interested in the history of our collection. How did this come together? Why was this here? How did the world change as this collection was being built? So we published a book on the history of the collection. We recently published a book on recent acquisitions. We've done 2 monographs together with museums. Our books find their way to libraries. So part of it was a publication strategy. We also do a lot of education. We do over 100 tours a year. My curator in London has a relationship with a school in an underprivileged area there. She does regular programming with them. So I would say my whole global team is very hands-on, active with education. And then, of course, at any given time, we have a lot of works on loan in various institutions around the world. This week, we have 3 works at the Fondation Pfeiffer, for example. But there are also moments where it's appropriate to make gifts of artworks from our collection. Maybe something doesn't fit so much anymore. Recently, we made a gift of almost 300 photographs to the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. They were historical photographs, and we just felt they belong in a museum. But we also deliberately chose a museum that had free access to the public and a reputation for research and archival access, because we also donated the archives. So we're constantly thinking about, how to share this collection at a broader level.
That's terrific. Thank you. Okay, so I think we have time for one last thought here, and maybe, Anna, I think I might give this to you to wrap us up. But I want to think about the future a little bit, because I think over the last several decades, there's been a real sea change in corporate and institutional collecting. It's much more global in nature today. I think that's true for all of your institutions. It's very contemporary in a sense, which I think was not necessarily the case in the past. And I guess I'm curious to hear some of your more speculative ideas. If the world was very different 50 years ago, it's going to be very different 50 years from now. So what do you think the world might look like for corporate institutional collections that isn't happening today?
Referring on the loans you mentioned, Mary, I think the future will be much more about cooperations between institutions, corporate collections, private collections, because we all see the situation in the world. We all know about budget cuts, especially for cultural institutions. And I think this bringing energy and resources together is something we have to focus much more on. And I'm very optimistic that in 50 years this will already be daily business. And I think another topic that will be solved, but I don't know how, is this, you also mentioned it, this dilemma, or at the moment we feel there's the digitalization and there's the encounter with art in person. And we are all struggling a lot. How do we bring this together? Because at the end, we want the people to stand in front of the original artwork, to feel it, to experience it. And we all struggle a bit. How do we bring those two angles or strings together? And I think in 50 years, this won't be any...
There'll be no distinction between those categories.
Yeah, and I think, and I hope that the people will, because digital living will be so normal, that the encounter with art is something very special. This is my naive wish for the future.
Very good. Well, terrific. Well, a lot to look forward to over the next 50 years. I want to thank each of you very much for sharing about your experience and your expertise in this space. And please join me in thanking our panelists for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Matthew and Cathérine. Mary, it's been a fantastic panel, so inspiring, so much to continue in the future. We're going to take a quick break and come back for our last panel of the day, which is going to draw very fascinating parallel between Hong Kong and Basel. If you're wondering why, come back. See you later. Thank you.